The downfall of Morphe Cosmetics is not what people think. A lot of questions have been circulating online about why Morphe, this cosmetic brand that was really popular in the early YouTube days, owes people like Jaclyn Hill $2 million or Jeffree Star $1.5 to $1.7 million, especially when they are filing for a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Well, there's a lot that's going on here, and a lot that's actually behind the scenes that involves Ariana Grande and her line Rem Beauty, even brands like Bybee and Playa Beauty who's actually suing Morphe as a company. So let's talk about what's going on, what's actually happening, and kind of get behind the scenes of the beauty industry, because I don't actually think that Morphe is planning to go out of business. Even though Morphe 2 with Charli and Dixie Emilio did not do as well as they had probably hoped or projected, there is a lot going on here. But in order to understand that, we have to start at the beginning. Morphe started in the late 2000s in Burbank, basically an area near Los Angeles, by two siblings. And it was this brand that was meant to celebrate artistry. Well, it started to take YouTube by storm, because instead of Morphe going into brands like Sephora or selling at a lot of the retailers that people would shop in for makeup in the early and late 2000s, they started using influencers as their main way of marketing. And in the beginning days of YouTube, I as well didn't see through this. I used to watch people like Jaclyn Hill, or a lot of the other booty gurus that I loved were people like Candy Johnson and Michelle Phan, and I still do. But at that time, it wasn't very clear to audiences that influencers may be getting kickbacks, and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, didn't have as many laws or regulations about influencers promoting products, because the term influencer didn't really exist at that point. Morphe started giving people like Jaclyn Hill coupon codes, and if you were around the YouTube booty guru days in the early times, Morphe was everywhere. A lot of people were speaking about it as if it were the best thing that had ever happened to the cosmetic industry. They didn't have skincare at the time, but they had these inexpensive makeup palettes with quality formulas that people used to love, and especially their brushes were sold all the time. I remember getting emails and approached by Morphe multiple times to do collaborations, and for me, it just wasn't something that I found to be authentic. And that's not to say that I'm better or worse than anybody else for what I did or didn't use, but Morphe was not a brand that I personally chose to reach for. But when I saw all of these other people using this brand that they were saying was so interesting, I was wondering why my products that I had from the brand just didn't feel as quality or as good. Well, over time, we actually got to learn more about that. And it seems that Morphe actually sourced a lot of their products from overseas and basically relabeled it. Now, this is a way a lot of brands start and a lot of brands work, so there's not technically any harm in it, but it also means that you don't have full control over the formulas. Now, that did start to change, especially when Jaclyn Hill and Jeffree Star started to release some of their custom palettes. These formulas were actually created uniquely by Morphe in some of the manufacturing facilities that they had to co-brand with these influencers. Now, unfortunately, over time and multiple launches, it seemed like the quality was getting worse. At least that's what the consumer sentiment was online. Things didn't look or feel as quality as they used to. Now, that could be just a bad batch, or that could be an overarching issue. But even for those who are much more heavily entrenched in the makeup world than I am, the sentiment appears to be, Morphe was a brand that was good at best, but it wasn't really revolutionary. But again, the way a lot of influencers promoted it, you would think otherwise. Morphe did get into a bit of trouble, specifically with James Charles, and I think that what caused Morphe to rise to fame was also the reason for their downfall. Because you see, when someone like James Charles collaborated on the artistry palette, it was wonderful because we finally had a rainbow palette, like with a really good red that people could use. But then they decided to go and sell a mini, which really didn't hit right for the audience, especially for the price. And because it didn't sell out, some people have said that James Charles had a tantrum online. I never actually saw this, so I didn't really pay attention. But it's this kind of entitlement that some, not all influencers have, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths who are consuming these products or this content as a way to relax, as a way to learn or express our creativity. And unfortunately, it feels like Morphe kind of followed these influencers down the same road of thinking that they're too big to fall, especially when Morphe started opening retail stores in malls all across America and internationally. Now, here's the thing about business. It is expensive to run e-commerce, but it is even more expensive to run a brick and mortar location, basically a location that someone walks into. You have rent, you have lights, you have to train specialized employees who not only do cosmetics and makeup, but also do sales. You have to make sure that you have shipping logistics to get products not just to a consumer's house, but to a retail store. And you have to estimate how much volume each store is going to sell. This is extraordinarily complex, but obviously, Morphe was doing something right. They ended up being $1 billion business for a period of time. But unfortunately, they didn't just open up stores where their customers were. It appears they started opening up stores absolutely everywhere, even in some malls that didn't seem like it really matched their target demographic. And with those overhead expenses, it's really not a huge surprise that lawsuits ended up being filed against them. Basically, companies said, Morphe, you didn't pay your rent to us, and that is not okay. Now, when these retail stores first opened, some locations were bustling. Jaclyn Hill was there cutting the ribbon and opening it up. Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson had a sellout palette, The Conspiracy Theory, that was actually sold in partnership with Morphe. And obviously, it was these makeup influencers that were bringing their audiences into the store to have this experience. And it was working for a period of time. But unfortunately, nobody could have seen the panorama, the panini, the pandemic that ended up happening in 2020. The pandemic nearly killed the makeup industry. When people were wearing masks, a lot of people weren't focused on foundation or lipsticks. And of course, this is something that happened to all businesses and is not unique to Morphe. But I think that the way Morphe failed to pivot and what happened with a purchase of Morphe just a year before in 2019 really plays into this. Now, even though Morphe was started in 2008, they were acquired in 2019 for $2.2 billion, that's billion with a B, by General Atlantic. This is when they started creating custom brands such as Jaclyn Hill Cosmetics, or even Bad Habit by Emma Chamberlain. Obviously, all of this investor money or investor capital allowed them to do that and open up a few stores. But a lot of Morphe's success was riding on the coattails of these makeup influencers. And when they weren't able to successfully pivot to skincare, when people started caring more about it during the pandemic because of Zoom fatigue and maskne, it was really hard for them to stay afloat, both with their doors open and even online. We all know that makeup sales dropped and plummeted. We've even seen Jeffree Star, who has his own cosmetics line, Jeffree Star Cosmetics, complaining that things aren't selling out anymore. That's never happened. And this, again, from an outsider's perspective, can feel like an influencer just complaining that things aren't handed to them on a plate anymore. I'm not here to claim that that is or is not the case, but I definitely understand that sentiment. And I think that there are some influencers who feel that they are too good to fail, that they can get away with things without repercussions, as we've seen with the conversations between James Charles, Jeffree Star, and Tati Westbrook. But I think that Morphe as a brand, because they were built on influencers, they also started to fall when people realized, are these influencers really being credible? Is this drama really something I want to consume? Being in the creator space is very unique because as a creator, that person is the business, which is really weird. And sometimes there are influencers who have a persona that is very different than their private life. For example, Trisha Paytas, I again don't know her personally. I haven't spent an extensive amount of time with her, but who she is online as a troll might not be who she is behind the scenes with her new baby and her husband. She still said some terrible things, which we can talk about at a future time because today is not the video for that. But when you have someone like James Charles messing up so publicly, or someone like Jeffree Stars with the puppet strings behind the scenes manipulating things, when all of that gets exposed or uncovered, it could leave a lot of people saying, even though the product is good or even though I really like the formula, I'm not going to support this person. And because most of Morphe's brands are centered around a focal person as opposed to just the brand itself, there's no wonder a lot of sales started dropping from factors like the pandemic, but also what was happening in the greater creator economy. I think that during this time, a lot of people also realized that a lot of influencers are here to sell us things. A lot of influencers maybe don't have our best interest in mind. And again, I can't speak to who Jaclyn Hill is as a person. She's obviously done some amazing things for the world, but some people have critiqued her promotion of her own products, or Morphe brushes, where she holds them up and says she loves them so much and it's her favorite, but she can't remember which one it is. Or, how Morphe is the best, but it literally has like Crown Cosmetics on the side because that's where Morphe was sourcing from. And as consumers, I feel that we need to be conscious consumers and kind of see that that's happening, but also recognize that this is nothing new. If you look at traditional media, why do you think celebrities and brands have always partnered together? Yes, now celebrities are coming out with their own celebrity skincare lines, which are disasters. But in the past, celebrities would partner with these brands just to sell people things. I mean, do you remember when Miley Cyrus was even doing her music videos and she was like using all this EOS lip balm that ended up in a lawsuit? Well, that was direct product placement. Why do you think in movies there are certain brands like BlackBerry phones that are used? Or if you ever watch K-dramas, have you noticed that subways pop up everywhere? That right there is product placement. And it has evolved over the years. It's no longer Jessica Simpson selling her dessert-flavored body lickable creams, but it is a new form of advertising. And if that helps someone and introduces them to a great brand or product that fits their lifestyle, then great. But if it's manipulative, and if celebrities and influencers are lying or pushing products that are literally harmful, That's a whole different situation, which also gets us into the Jaclyn Hill situation. You see, Jaclyn Hill had created a custom brand with Morphe. And although Jaclyn claims that she was the CEO and founder, she might not be the full owner. Well, Jaclyn Hill was promoting these products, and all of a sudden people realized that there were some ingredients in the products that weren't supposed to be there. Specifically, the formula was changed to include carmine, a red pigment that comes from beetles. And Jaclyn Hill said that she wasn't aware of this, even though she claimed the formula was the same. It absolutely wasn't. If Morphe the brand was willing to pull this right over her eyes, are they exploiting Jaclyn? Did Jaclyn know this and she's exploiting her fans? Did the manufacturer that Morphe is getting it from exploit them? It's an entire twisted tale that we don't know the truth of. But Morphe did get a lawsuit, a pending class action suit, about having unsafe cosmetics used in the eye areas. There are specific dyes and colorants and ingredients that are not eye safe, specifically not tested by an ophthalmologist or not approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And apparently Morphe was selling products that caused harm to some users. I don't know all of the details, and of course these have to go to court. This is all alleged until proven otherwise. But the fact that it appears that this has happened, or that allegedly it has, is very concerning when you start to stack up everything else. Now, after these two lawsuits came a third, which was from Playa Cosmetics. Apparently the owner of this hair care brand, Playa Beauty, was one that was going to be sold in stores, and she was given some grand promises. Well, now she's suing for $15 million because she basically said, hey, Morphe lied to me. They weren't honest. They gave me a $250,000 signing bonus, which is a lot, but they said that they would take over my brand and make it great, and they did not deliver on that promise. You see, when Morphe opened up all of these locations and malls across America and internationally, they weren't just selling Morphe products. They started to bring in other brands. That's how Ariana Grande's Rem Beauty got involved. I don't know if Ariana Grande's Rem Beauty is actually manufactured by Morphe. The quality seems to be much different, much better, if I do say so myself. In my own personal, objectionable opinion. But Rem Beauty was actually sold in Morphe's stores, so there was a collaboration there. Same with brands like Bybee, which is a really great skincare line that's also sold in Target. Even Item Beauty from Addison Rae had some sort of partnership there, and with skincare brands like Item Beauty and Bad Habit, it also goes to show that just because you launch skincare at a time that skincare is popular doesn't mean it's going to succeed. I think that thankfully consumers like you and I are much smarter, and we know that just because this person is our favorite TikToker or somebody that we love online doesn't mean that they're a cosmetic chemist, or doesn't mean that they know what's good in skincare products. Again, if we need a glaring example of this, Trishie just relaunched her ASMR Trish Skin. But you see, as these influencers continued launching products thinking they were too big to fail, a lot of their actions caught up with them. And in a less nefarious way, the same thing happened with Morphe. They started opening up all these stores, riding the curtails of influencers. But as sentiment changed and the pandemic came around, so did their sales. And even when we look at retail stores now, there are a lot that are closing. When you look at the economy, we are in a technical recession, meaning negative GDP for 2 earnings cycles, yet a recession hasn't technically been announced. But when you look at how consumers are spending, how layoffs are happening, including layoffs or firings or closings at Morphe, a lot of customers don't have as much disposable income to spend on things like brand new makeup palettes. And because of the pandemic, makeup trends have changed, and I don't feel like Morphe has innovated with their products to catch up with that. Not only that, but people care about quality. People care about the morals and ethics and values of the brands that they're supporting. And especially when retail locations have been closed for the pandemic, a lot of them just have remained closed, or those that are opening up are actually turning into experiences. Look at Allure, who had like a literal slide inside of their cosmetics store. A lot of these experiences are what people are looking for now instead of just basic aspects of shopping. Now that may change, especially as things continue to reopen. But with Morphe, it's obviously going the opposite direction. There's been a lot of controversy and criticism online of how Morphe has shut down stores without telling employees. Basically saying, doors are closed, it's your last day in like 3 days with no warning. And I can only imagine how awful it is to have an employer do that to you. But the sad, dirty side of the beauty business and the beauty industry and the business industry as a whole is that that might not technically be illegal. You see, depending on the company size and where that company is located or where those stores are located, you might not have to give employees forewarning. For instance, I live in California in San Francisco, which is where Morphe is now owned and operated out of with Forma Brands. California is an at-will state. That means anyone can be fired at any time, anyone can quit at any time without having to give 2 weeks notice. Anyone can be let go at the blink of an eye. And that is terrifying. especially if you're relying on a job for stability and income, but it's not technically illegal. And of course, this is devastating for those who have worked there for so long or feel connected to the company. But at the same time, look at what happened. You have a brand that was built off of making money based on influencers shilling promotional codes. Then it got acquired by a big investment firm, opened up a bunch of stores. If they're not communicating accurately with their influencers about what ingredients are in the eyeshadow, or if they're not communicating accurately with their customers, why would we expect these large corporations to communicate with their employees? It's awful. And I can imagine that there are some small businesses that have to close for these reasons, but I don't think Morphe is a small business if they just got acquired for $2.2 billion. It sounds like they are offering severance in some cases, which at least in California is not a requirement, but still, it is devastating. And it is so sad that they seem to be trying to hush this and kind of brush it under the table. Well, as of this month, Morphe has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And a lot of the questions or comments that I'm seeing online are, oh my gosh, Morphe is shutting down, like they failed so badly, blah, 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 blah. I don't actually know if that's the case. Think about when an influencer gets canceled online. Look at James Charles, look at Jeffree Star. There's backlash, which you could look at in the Morphe situation as the lawsuits. There's losing subscribers, which you could look at as Morphe closing down stores. There is negative sentiment, which you could look at the drama channels or the news that's going out about this. But based on all of this, the influencers end up getting views, attention, and being able to monetize that. And especially those who have been canceled online, cancellation seems to be only temporary because they're still definitely around, and in some cases still repeating the same actions that they were canceled for. And now you see, even though Morphe and Forma brands are filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and so is Jaclyn Hill Cosmetics, who is associated with them, that doesn't actually mean that they're shutting down. The influencer isn't canceled. The brand isn't gone. You see, Chapter 11 bankruptcy is a very unique style of bankruptcy. It's not full-on liquidation, meaning sell all of your assets, shut the doors, and go bye-bye. Chapter 11 bankruptcy is a type of restructuring, basically a way to say, we've got a lot of debts or lawsuits, let's clear those out. Let's pay out the lawyers, let's pay out the stakeholders, let's pay out the CEOs and still give them all of their big expensive salaries. But everyone else, the customers, any shareholders, if it's a publicly traded company, anybody like Jaclyn Hill or Jeffree Star who might have contracts with them, they kind of get wiped out. Chapter 11 is basically restructuring, trying to buy a company time to reorganize things. And usually this means that the company is planning to be bought. Now this purchase could be less than ideal. For example, another company could come in and say, hey, Morphe, instead of paying you $1 of money for each dollar that your business is worth, we're gonna pay you 25 cents based on each dollar that your business is worth. And that's how they scoop it up as a profit, maybe rebrand it or try to save it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the company is shutting its doors for good or going out of business. And again, even though the Morphe 2 launch with Charli and Dixie D'Amelio flopped, and even though the company appears to be flopping, I don't know if it actually is. You see, Forma Brands, who owns Morphe and Jaclyn Cosmetics and is associated with all of this, it seems like they're being bought by secured lenders. There's a specific proposal of a deal that says, quote, is expected to significantly strengthen Forma Brands' financial position and provide additional support for the execution of its long-term growth strategy, which will focus largely on the company's global wholesale and e-commerce operations. Is it not just me, or does that sound like they're gonna continue doing influencer branded or white label custom branded products and continue selling them? Now, I haven't looked at all of the bankruptcy filings, but usually you have assets versus liabilities. How many assets does the company have? How much product do they have? I mean, even the value of the computers and the furnitures in the office. And then what are the liabilities? For example, how much do they owe on rent? How much do they owe people on payroll? How much do they owe influencers like Jaclyn Hill, who's claiming $2 million, or Jeffree Star, who's claiming 1.7. This is what needs to be weighed out. And I actually have a sneaking suspicion that just like influencers being canceled not being the end, I really don't think this is the end for Morphe or for Forma Brands. Now, with these influencers, I think that those prices are shocking to many people, especially because so many people, including myself, used to watch these people and not know that, like, oh my God, we're being sold to. We are being pushed these products that aren't actually that good, you know, that come from China or come from somewhere. They're being shilled under different names, and we're told that the quality is the same, but then we swatch them at home and we wonder why they're staining our skin or why they don't look any good. But when you actually look at the beauty industry, I'm not surprised that these influencers are owed so much. And the reason isn't because of the influencers themselves, it's because of the markups in the beauty industry. The beauty, specifically makeup and fragrance, perfume industries have some of the highest markups, 10x to 20x, meaning if you could make a perfume, bottle, fragrance, and everything for $1, it might be sold for 10 or 20 times that amount. Literally, brands are making something for $5 and selling it for $100. Look at La Mer. Do you really think that's worth $400 of a seaweed cream? You're paying for the branding, you're paying for the marketing, you're paying for a name. And yes, there are many costs that go into products, some products that really source ingredients well, or spend a lot of money on research and development, on formulation, keeping the lights on, paying the employees, giving them severance, not laying them off with 1 day's notice. That is very expensive, and especially for small brands, it does cost a lot. But once a brand starts to scale, especially at $2.2 million like Morphe is, it's very easy for them to start to cut corners. You automate, you delegate, and you are able to get some insane markups. Imagine going to Whole Foods versus Costco. If you want to buy one SPF lip gloss, it might be $20. But if you want to go buy, an entire box of 30 of these at Costco, you could get 30 for $13 or $14 each. Well, the same thing happens in the beauty world. They say, hey, manufacturer, we want to buy a whole bunch of pigment. Instead of just buying one little box the way an indie brand might, we're going to buy a ton of it. So give us a discount on that. Now, because a lot of these products are marked up by 10x, and Morphe, again, especially back when I was trying out some of the products in my makeup days, they are very OEM, original equipment manufacturer packaging, just the basics of the basics. They didn't put a lot in effort into that, in my personal opinion. Well, if they're marking this up 10x and making so much money, they could afford to pay a ton of money to influencers. If they kept the sales up, they could afford to open all these stores. What they didn't expect is for people to see through the bullshit, for the market to turn, for the pandemic to happen, for people to turn on some influencers when audiences realized, these people aren't maybe who we really want to be supporting. And I mean, things just went in a totally different direction. Now, what's difficult is that with the amounts of money that Jaclyn Hill and Jeffree Star are allegedly owed, we don't know what the time frame of that is, and we don't know what that's for. Is that $2 million for the entire 10 years that Jaclyn Hill has been working with the brand? Or was that the cost of one palette, or one in-store experience, or just affiliate earnings? We don't actually know. And the larger corporations get, the more they tend to default or delay their payments. I mean, there are certain instances in which large corporations don't even pay their contractors for 90 or 180 days. And the reason that they extend that so much is so that they can inflate their books. It looks like they have tons of cash flow when really they're just paying it out in the next financial quarter. Because in finance and taxes, things are broken down into quarters, not just months of the year. And so we don't know the time frame of when these funds were accrued. And if that's $2 million over 10 years, maybe that's a little bit more reasonable. Or again, is this for one brand deal, one instance? Now, hey, if they had a contract, if they agreed to that, whether or not it's actually worth that value, if you agreed to something, you kind of need to pay it. And that's just the way it works. But you see, this Chapter 11 restructuring is very convenient because it's a way for Morphe to say, well, we're restructuring. Forma says, well, we're just gonna wipe out these debts. Again, the first things go to the lawyers. They're the ones who really get paid here. And then those open contracts, because of Chapter 11, they're now allowed to cancel those contracts that they may not have been able to before, which means they might not have to pay out affiliate earnings to people who have earned them. And that's the other thing, is that if that's affiliate earnings, if Jeffree Star is doing $1.7 million in affiliate earnings, can you even imagine how much Morphe is making? Can you imagine the markups on that? Morphe's not going to pay out $1.7 million if they're making 1.5 or just 1. They're probably making tenfold of that. And Jeffree Star and Jaclyn Hill or James Charles are getting maybe a percent or a fraction of a percent. Now, while Morphe is not my personal favorite brand, I don't think it's terrible. I don't agree with a lot of what they're doing, but if you look at any large corporation, they all have issues. But if you don't want to support Morphe anymore, even if they do rebrand or come back, there are other brands that I think are really great and worth supporting. Some influencer or public persona brands that I really like are things like Cove. Yes, that happens to be a celebrity skincare line from Emily D'Amato, somebody. Really good formulas. Look at Fenty Skin. Yes, it's involved with Kendo Brands, who also does things like KVD Beauty and Ulla Henriksen, which is another one of my favorites, but I feel like they actually do their products really, really, really well. And I've been trying some Fenty stuff, and let me just say, Riri has got me out here questioning my past assumptions on products and my previous opinions with some of their new launches. If you look at Huda Beauty, she has a line called Wishful Skin that is actually a lot of fun. And if you're looking for makeup, I mean, Huda Beauty. If you want it done right, Huda Beauty. Wander Beauty, one amazing skincare line that a lot of people don't know is associated with a celebrity. If you want an influencer line, Skincare by Hiram. I am very critical when it comes to my reviews, and I try to separate the person and the influencer versus the actual product. But when you just look at it from a product perspective, they have been doing some really interesting stuff. And the price isn't as low as the Inky list, but they've got some good formulas. Look at Jaclyn. Look at her candle line. Absolutely phenomenal and delicious smelling. There are some brands out there that are created by and publicly backed by influencers or content creators or personas that are really good. Look at Blogilates. Cassie Ho's clothing, fucking amazing. And she actually cares about the design. And I think that's the difference, is that if you can find someone who's actually promoting something that they created, that they love, that they're an expert in, that to me makes a little bit more sense. And on a personal note, I would rather put my money where my morals are and purchase those brands that I agree with, that match my morals and values, rather than something inexpensive like Morphe that is being promoted by two very talented individuals like Charlie and Dixie D'Amelio, but maybe don't exactly have the passion behind it. The business of beauty is not always pretty, but I think it's so important to be aware of these things. And I think that with the headlines that we see, it's very easy to get lost in them and to just assume that we know what's happening, when behind the curtains, the beauty industry is very, very different. And I think what this means for you is understand these things, especially if you're interested in them. Make sure that when influencers are doing things online or promoting a product, you can actually find out if the product is good, if it works well, and if it's right for you, or if this is just a person that you really like that is promoting it. Look at Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop, an amazing actress, a beautiful woman, so talented in so many different ways. But does that mean that she's good at making skincare? If you really want a great example, Valkyrie, when she actually stepped away from a skincare line brand deal because she realized the company was basically taking advantage of her. That's honesty. That's integrity. I know a lot of people don't like her for that, but I applaud her for it. There's actually a video on that over here if you would like to see it. And there's a coffee over there waiting for me to be consumed because, girl, today I need it. Overall, consider this some food for thought. My opinion soup is here for you to share, or you could just ignore it or vomit it up if you don't like me, that's fine. But do know that I love you. I want you to stay hydrated both orally and topically. I want you to reapply that SPF because it is medically recommended for our health and safety as well as our beauty. But overall, do remember to be beautiful both inside and out, which also means analyzing the things that we purchase, the people that we follow, and making sure that we are purchasing and consuming things that actually nourish us, whether it's our brains, our hearts, or just our bodies as a whole. I love you, and I cannot wait to see you in this next video. Love you guys. Bye!